Hello fiber friends. Today we're going to be making the Demeter table runner, and this is a table runner that my mother requested actually. I asked her like, what should I make this month? And she said she needed a table runner for her table, so I took that inspiration and ran with it and ended up with this, which is a 3-panel 12.5-inch square unfinished for each of these, so it ends up being 36 inches wide and 12 inches tall, I guess, in this dimension. And it features acorns, wheat, and whatever moon phase you choose. So this is the full moon that I've made, and then there's every other moon phase as well. So I think I'm going to show you how to do it on the full moon template. So it'll look a little different if you decide to do it differently, but I think the full moon is really the autumn ideal here. So then we also have a foundation paper piecing element, which is the dancing acorns block, I called it, and it's just some cute little acorns that you can especially use some fussy cuts in the acorn if you want to, and then orient them different ways. So there's a lot of customization in this if you want to. It's standard piecing, it's raw edge applique, which I haven't taught yet, and foundation paper piecing, which we've done a bunch of. So I'm going to start with the moon here, and then I'll probably, I think the instructions go, let's look, I forget. Looks like we go from moon to acorn. So then we'll do the wheat stalks. And I'm also testing these measurements for the first time in this pattern, so if I do mess up, I will put a note in the video that lets you know what the actual thing is, and it will be correct in the pattern when you get it. Let me just show you what fabrics I chose. So starting with the moon, I'm going for a floral theme. So we have the blackness of space as a black for the background, and then the moon shadow is meant to be like just a little bit lighter than the background, so it causes this little sliver here to give the moon some dimension. And then the moon itself should be a really bright fabric, but I did floral here, so I thought, why not do floral here as well? This looking a little more like craters. So we're gonna have a dark floral moon, kind of goth. And then for the acorns, I have these actually in order. So this is the background of my acorns. For the body of the acorns, I'm actually using an acorn fabric, but it had this nice kind of like reddish brown that I thought looks like an acorn. And then I have this leftover fabric from a, gosh, I think I made this apron in the first like year that I lived in Chicago, maybe. And anyway, I like that it has this this texture that kind of reminds me of that like cup of the acorn there, kind of like that. And then for the stem, I just had this little cut of a brown-black, kind of a foggy background. It's kind of digital too. It's kind of hard to see. But anyway, I thought that looked nice without being just like a solid brown. So that's the acorn. And then for my wheat stalks, I chose a background of this kind of like dusky gray. So I normally write patterns to show a white background, but I never really want you to use a white background. So I chose this dusky gray, kind of gives a like level of dusk, like a sun going down, kind of like just after the sun's out gray of the sky. And then I had these two colors of this little print that's like macaroni and elephants, or not macaroni, it's a rainbow, I guess. So I had these two, and I was like, you know, two of the same print off color. I like that because it is really how the pattern feels. And then for the stems, this little wood grain. So I expect to see a little bit of that, which I think will give a nice textural element too. So as you can see, I'm playing with textures here. And I pulled all of this from Stash, so I'm pretty happy with that. So anyway, let's get started with our moon. So just to show you real quick, did I take them all off? No, there they are. We have a bunch of different templates. So this is the half moon template, the crescent moon template, and the gibbous template, waning or waxing, depending on how you flip it. So these three templates, like I said, can be flipped to get the other side of the moon phase that you want. And then I have already cut out the full moon template, which looks like a whole half hemisphere, but it is a little bit short on, I believe, this side. Just so that you get a little sliver over here. So, or I mean, I guess maybe out here. Anyway, you'll see when it doesn't align up correctly. So the important thing about these is that you can flip them to get the other phase if you want that. And I guess flip by this, I mean, because we're going to cut this on the fold. So we put this on a folded piece of fabric. We're going to cut around it and then fold it open to make the actual shape that we want. That's the important part. So don't cut out this template unless you have a folded piece of fabric and 2 layers across both of that. And I'll show you that right now. So I'm going to start off by ironing this fabric, and I need to iron both of these actually. So these are fat quarters. At minimum, you need 12.5-inch square. See, I'm leaving them on the fold there. I'm actually going to layer these and do both at the same time. For ironing, not cutting. Okay, so actually let's start off with the moon shadow, because we don't need this anymore. My floor is very squeaky today. So we'll put the moon shadow on here, and remember we're lining with this fold, and we can just hold it in place and carefully cut around with our rotary cutter. I'll check that we're doing a good job there. Looks like we are. Continue to hold it in place and go the other way. You just really want to keep an eye on that you're not cutting into the paper. If you do a little bit, that's okay. We'll see how that is. Oops, still stuck. Alright, looks pretty good to me. So we're done with this. I'm going to fold it up. And then let's cut our next one. You know what, if we want to see what's what here, okay, so this is the short side. It doesn't really matter, I just like to keep my eye on stuff. So we're on the fold again. Just gonna make that a little curve cut. Fold up our extra. Okay, and we'll put our templates over here because we don't need them anymore. Okay. Sometimes with curves my eyes deceive me. I just want to make sure that I'm going to press these out. I say press. If you're going to iron, try to keep it with the grain. The difference between ironing and pressing is movement. This is our background. Actually, we'll just leave that in place. And it looks like you kind of want to see that crease still, so you can align them. Looks like that's on grain. And that's on grain. So there we have our moon. And so what we're going to do next is glue this onto our background fabric, which we will cut a square of first. And then we'll just raw edge applique around it, nice and easy. Maybe let's prep all the blocks first. So, I'm going to press this. This might sound silly, but we need a 12.5-inch square background here. I'm going to cut one that's a little bit bigger. And then we'll place the moon and stitch it down. But in case the stitching pulls in any of the fabric, we'll have a little bit extra to trim off. So I'm going to cut it at 13.5-ish. Make sure we don't run into anyone there. Okay. It's not that bad. Okay. Not sure what I did there. Okay, so we're at 13. And that just gives us a little leeway. It was going to be most of this piece anyway, so. There you have it. So we're prepped for this piece. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of our extra stuff. Such a short lifespan, but it helps us out a lot. Okay, and so Acorns, these are foundation paper pieced, so we really only need rough cuts for them. I provided those measurements in the pattern, so I'm going to cut these with scissors. Okay, so we need 4 4-inch squares for the acorn body, a That's what we're using this acorn fabric for. You may know I'm a big fan of the cut and rip method. So I'm actually going to cut this at 4.5. And each of these is 5. So we can cut larger than the measurement. The measurements are minimums. But these are all nice and folded for me already. So here we have acorn body. Let's cut all the acorn pieces first and then the background. So we need, for the background cap, 4 2.5 by 5 inch rectangles. So snip here to take that ugly part off. 5.5. Let's make it 6. Okay, and then we said 2.5. So 3, 3, 3, and 3. Notice I'm saying it's a bigger measurement just because it gives you a little more space. I'm going to keep saying that because you don't need to worry too much about wasting fabric and foundation paper piecing. It's not all that much. And then lastly, for the 1B piece, 4 2-inch squares. So actually just cut. What is this piece already? 5, 6. So let's just make it 3 and 3. So this is a scrap. So that's a lot for that piece, to be honest. Let us make ourselves some interesting scrap here. We can just play with those later. Okay, so we're good on our acorn pieces. For background now, I think I made a lot of these cuts similar because they were close enough, in my mind at least. I don't know if it's this. All right. So for the background, we need, I'm going to start with 2A, I'm going to start with template A basically. 3.5 by 2-inch rectangles. So let's cut some 2-inch strips. What do we need? 4. We need 8. So let's cut 2 2-inch strips. Layer them up. They all pretty much line up, so they need to be 3.5 by 2. That's 4 of them. That's 8 of them. Yeah. And they need to be like 4 and 4, so 2 and 3. And then for 4 and 5A, 3-inch by 2-inch. Oh look, we still have some 2-inch here, and it's just bigger than 3 inches. So there's some of that. Flip it over to make it into 4. Then cut the 3. So there's 4 and 5. All the pieces for this template now. So we'll start on template B. These are going to be I'm reading my own directions wrong. Okay. We need 8 of them for 3B and 4B, 2.5 by 2-inch rectangles. So let's cut another strip of 2. And so we're going to need some 2.5-inch squares for the next one. So let's just cut a 2.5. Okay. So these are 3B and 4B. Lost it again. 2.5 by 2. Okay. So there's 4. There's 8. So 1. That wasn't 2. What do we have for 2B? 4 1.5-inch squares. Okay, we can do that from this piece. So real quick, we'll just get, that's close to 2.5. It's basically 2.5, and then we're making these into triangles. So we'll just turn them on the diagonal, cut them on the diagonal. 6 and 7. And then 1.5-inch squares for 2. These are already 2.5. Frankly, let's just do that. So there's the triangles for 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and the templates. So we are set for Dancing Acorns. Oh, that's too big to go in this scrap. And lastly, we will do the exacting cuts we will need for the wheat stalk trio block. I'm going to move these guys somewhere else so I don't cut into them. So we have our light wheat color A, our dark wheat color B, stem color C, way more of that than you need, and then our background, which is a 5/4. FQ if you're averse to the word fat, which you shouldn't be. And so we need to cut 6 2 5/8 inch squares for both the light wheat color and the dark wheat color. So I'm going to press these out, leave them folded in halves, and we can cut their strips at the same time. Alrighty. So put these on a square. Remember, these are not rough cuts, these are exact. So we need to keep things on the square now as opposed to the foundation paper piecing. I have these layers doubled up, as you can see. So we need 2 5/8, which is 1/8 more than a half. If you're looking on your ruler, it should be 3/8 less than a full 3 inches. So we should be able to get 6 of these from each of these because it's doubled on both. I guess that's all we need for that. It seems unreal, but anyway. All right, so let's make sure that we have at least 9 inches to work with here. And we do +1. So I'm going to trim this off. I say 9 because 2 5/8 rounds up to 3. So a conservative estimate is 9. We've trimmed off the end here, so we'll go back to our 2 5/8 from the end. And we made 2 of each. So we have 2 3/8 here from our last cut. So to add 2/8, we add a 1/4 inch from that mark. So 1/4 inch plus 3/8 is 5/8. 2/8 plus 3/8. Make that cut. If you want to check it, you can line it up against your last ones too. So we have 3/4 here, which is 6/8. So we'll go 2. We have 2 6/8 over now, so we'll go under 1/8 to get our 5/8 instead. And then cut that off. So let's collate our pieces here. I guess reverse collate. I still don't really understand what that word means, but there's our squares for our wheats. For our stems here, we're going to need 3 1-inch by 10 1/4 inch rectangles. This piece of fabric I have is full yardage here, so I'm going to leave it folded into quarters. Actually, yeah, I am. That's what I'm doing. Because I'm fussy cutting a little bit here. I want to make sure that I get this grain going this way. So I want to make sure that I'm getting my grain going this way, which is the long length of this rectangle in the way that it is in the pattern. So what I want to do is make sure that I'm cutting a 10 1/4 inch wide piece instead of a 1 inch wide piece. So I think if the instructions say 1 inch by 10 1/4 inch, if you have a piece that you really want to maintain this sort of like striation in, you want to make sure that you take this 10 1/4 inch length here. So I'm going to cut a 1/4 inch over here to trim off my square. And then, this, I will note, this is a large piece to be cutting to just get 4 1-inch pieces of this, but that's just how it goes. I have a lot of this fabric, so 6, and then we'll add 4, so we're 4 1/4. Square up there. Alright, looks good. It's also okay if this is a little long, you can trim it after you sew it on. We're going to trim it anyway after we sew it on to get a thinner length than what the piece is. Okay, so now I have a 10 1/4 inch strip. Put this on the square again, at least for the 2 inches we're going to need. So we trim off this end. Cut 2 there. Two there. We only need 3, but never hurts to have an extra. And I'll hold on to this piece because it's already got this nice length cut out like that, so I can use that somewhere else. Okay, and lastly we need to do our background pieces. Just going to move us out again for that. And we're going to use this gray FQ that I need to iron. That was folded poorly. Alright, so my square is on the bottom here. And my fold. Gross. Okay, so my square's on the bottom here. I'm gonna trim off my end. Okay. So I'm working with 20 inches here on each strip. Let's just check that's true. 15, yep, 21 inches here on this strip. So we need 12 2 5/8 rectangles. So let's do that same measurement again, 3/8 under 3, or 1/8 above a half. I hope when I say that that makes sense and I'm not just rambling, but let's see. It's only going to give us 6, so let's do another set. So we have 2 3/8. That means we need to add 2/8, which is 1/4. Cool. And let's trim that square. Okay, so we know we need these for HSTs. Let's cut a few more strips. We need 3 2 by 3/4 inch rectangles, 2 12.5 inch. What's this? Let's cut these 12.5 inch ones now. They can be bigger than 1.5 inch, and in fact I'm going to cut this one bigger than that. These are going to get put on the sides and then trimmed off if there's extra. So we just put those back there. Now let's cut these guys. I just wanted to make some room. I feel kind of stuffy today. All right, so there's 4 of those. We go 2 over and add a quarter again. Same rhythm as before. If you memorize some of these, it goes a lot faster. There's another 4. So we have 2 inches and 6/8 left over. So let's go under an eighth. I also find it's best to talk it out. So these go with our HSTs. Let's see, we have a little scrap here. I think there's a small piece that I can do in that 2 inches by 3/4. Okay. Let's see, we can just cut this at, cut a quarter off. And then it needs to be is that right? Okay, I found an error. This needs to be 2 1/4, not 2 inches. Which is supposed to be the same dimension as the finished HSTs. So you go in the middle. That's another one that can be wider because we're going to trim it. All right, so we've gotten our squares, our middle rectangles there. 6'5" by 2 1/4, so that's the space beneath or across from the stem. How many of those do we need? 6, 5 by 2 1/4. So I'm going to cut 5-inch slab here. A slab, more of a strip because it's wide. Okay, and then we'll get squared off. We'll leave, what do we say, 2 1/4? Yep. The dimension of the HST. Let's see, that's not enough. We need to go. But yes, it is. One plus 3/4 plus 1/2, 2 1/4. We have a 1/2 left, so we'll go 1/4 under 2 1/2. Just 2 1/4. Okay, so this goes on either side of the stem. And then the last pieces we need are 4 1/4 by 1 1/2. We need 3 of those. So let's cut a 1 1/2 inch strip. Sorry I didn't do these in order, folks, but sometimes it makes sense to do stuff when the strip is right there. 1.5 inch strip. Ooh. I thought I had a fold there. I guess I don't. So I need one more 1.5 inch. Nope, I can get the total out of that. 4 1/4. Thought it was shorter. So there's 4 1/4. We got 2. We have 3/4 left. 3 3/4 plus 1/2. 4 1/4. So here's the 3 we need. And those go at the top and bottom of the wheat stalks to alternate their stance. And that should be it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so let's organize these a little bit. Each of these 6 stacks needs 6 backgrounds. These side pieces go with the stems. These long boys go last with our alternating guys here, and those go in between. So that's a pretty good way to organize it. Done with these and scrap background. So we are now set to sew our quilt top for the Demeter table runner. I have some stuff to go do, so I'm going to go do that, but I'll be back shortly and we can get sewing. Okay, so first we're going to focus on the when I called this one the full moon block, the harvest moon blocks. Okay, so first we're going to start working on the harvest moon block. We have our background piece, we have our moon shadow piece, and our moon shape, whatever we decided. And so that that crease should align with the crease of your moon shadow background. So if you want it to be perfectly aligned, just make sure that those two things nest into each other. So I'm going to show you the way to do this with a thing called Wonder Under. There's other names for it. This is a paper that has a fusing like net on the back. So you press it onto the back of your piece of fabric, position your fabric, and then press that on, and then it glues it all together. So we're going to use this to make sure that we get a good glue across all of it. You can use glue stick. In this application, I would say only use glue stick if you don't plan to wash this. We want to make sure that the glue stick is, well, the glue stick is going to wash out, so you might end up with a little more ripply stuff on here. As long as you quilt that and like quilt over it, you'll be fine. This stuff, I don't know if it washes out, but it is like really useful to just do a really nice flat press. So what we're going to do first is trace those shapes. So we only need, so we need one that is going to be the circle. So just give that a light trace. We're going to cut it slightly smaller than what we need. that piece. Let's cut that out. I'm going to use my paper scissors for that. So like I said, we're going to cut it like a 1/4 inch under. This is just going to be a glue layer that we're going to apply. It doesn't need to go all the way out to the edge. So, that little piece. And then we need a slightly smaller piece for our moon shape. Okay, you can see that line on there. So we'll cut that out. Again, wrong scissors, about a 1/4 inch under. All right. Cut that off. Okay, so let's pair these pieces with who they're going to go with. Pair this piece with the circle. Okay, I'm going to bring the pressing board up here. And I'm making sure that my iron is nice and hot and does not have steam, no steam. So let's start with the moon. Just gonna wait a second for that. Okay, so we're definitely hot enough. So what you want to do now is just press, I think, about 15 seconds across this whole thing. The idea is that you're melting the glue and it's going to press into the fabric, and then we're going to let it cool so that when we pull the backing off, the glue remains on the fabric but not on the backing. So you can kind of see the difference there where it's been pressed down. It looks a little clearer. Let's do that again. You just want to do this across the whole piece. And you see we cut it under so that we don't get any glue on our pressing mat. This corner, and then we just have one little bit over there. Okay, and then that one. So in my experience, you do want to let this cool before you pull it off, or you might pull off some of the glue with it. This stuff is a little hard to take off, so we'll just have to see how that goes. One roll once over. Say it was hot. Everything looks pretty stuck down, so I'm going to let this cool over here. Now we'll do our moon piece. Make sure everything looks good there. I'm going to start in the middle this time. Because I'm holding for about 20 seconds. I've had mixed results with this in the past. You get this corner. It was just time to be real. Everyone's being real. I took the day off today because we have a long weekend next weekend of a wedding. I was gonna take that Monday off, but I have to go to a conference, so. Okay, one more. Okay, so everything's attached, so we'll let that one cool. So we'll let both of those cool for a minute, and then let's press our 12.5-inch plus block again. I should have noted no steam with those, no steam. I think they may have said that, but just to reiterate, no steam. Okay, so we're nice and solid there. I'll pull our moon piece over. We're just going to pull at this edge. So we just want to kind of flick that paper back. Make sure you're not grabbing too much of that glue. This is the tedious part. Okay, I pull a little bit of paper off. I can feel the tackiness of the glue there. Continue to peel. Oh my gosh. Okay. I don't know if my paper's old or what, but I thought it was supposed to come off in one piece. This is a bigger piece than I have done too, so. It looks like the cooling definitely helped. I wonder if it just kept the paper a little more attached than I wanted it. You really got to find your own rhythm with this paper stuff. So a little bit of... This piece. Okay, so I have all the paper off. Let's Just gonna feel for more paper. I don't feel any. So now we want to center this on our block. That looks pretty good to me. You of course don't have to center it. That's just how I've done the pattern. Now we're gonna do the same thing. So we're gonna melt that glue again. About 20 seconds each time. We don't want to move the iron around. That could stretch out the piece of fabric on top. We just want it to press into the other fabric. Okay. Move over here. So what I should have said too is if you're going to use glue stick for this, you don't have to iron it like this. You just glue it, press it in place, let it dry. It's quite easy. Just like paper, really. If you find any raw edges coming out, you can always just tuck them in. But again, we're raw edge applicating this, so it is going to, you know, have a little bit of a raw edge on it. One more up here, I think. Maybe a little bit down there. I believe I've heard some people claim that you don't even need to stitch this down once you've glued it, especially if you glue all the way out to the edge. I think that's silly. Just seems like a bad choice to me. Okay. So that should be good to go. So we have one whole piece that basically looks like it was stitched. Nice and flat. Our next piece, I'm going to pull that paper off again. Be a little more methodical this time. Okay, so we're going to look for our round edge, which looks like it's here. I'm going to position that in accordance with the other circle. Make sure it's the way we like. I think I want more yellow to show over here, so I'm wondering if I can position it like this. Yeah. So if you like a different angle, you can just rotate your block. Get in position. Same thing. We're just going to glue it down with the iron. Okay, so just make sure everything is nice and glued down. Should feel plenty thick with 3 layers there. You can stitch through all of that. Any modern machine shouldn't have an issue with that. So I'm going to throw my people away. I'm going to bring my machine up here with my table. And I'm going to show you how I stitch around the edges to make sure that it's nice and secure. Okay, so as you can see, I've set up my table here. I have my block ready to go, and I've put on a clear foot so I can see what's going on as I stitch. I'm going to set my machine to what I believe is called a blanket stitch. And this stitch in particular will take a bite out of the inside and then make a stitch on the outside, and then take a bite on the inside and take a stitch on the outside. So I'll show you how that works. On my Janome machine, it's stitch number 4. And yeah, it always takes a little bit to align it correctly, so actually I should probably start on the black side so that looks best whenever I ultimately mess it up. But I have switched to a black thread to blend in here, so I'm going to do black all the way around here, and then I'm going to do black around the edge of the moon. And this will also just kind of like hazy out the edge a little bit, helping it blend. So let me show you how I do this. If I remember correctly, I align on the inside part of that foot there. It's a little hard to see. Let's see if I have my little red dot there. And so I'm aligning on the right side of that. I'm going to take it nice and slow. I'm going to turn my speed down and set to 24. Okay. So it takes a stitch on the outside, and then a stitch on the inside, outside, inside, outside, inside. So I'm just going to follow along, rotating as I go to keep that edge right there. I'm going to do one full circle around the moon shadow. I'm going to be catching in the edge of the moon once I get there. If you start to bubble up, feel free to pause, reposition yourself. I have a few threads here that are kind of outside. They're a little more raw. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tuck them in line here, and they should get stitched over the top of. And now that I've gotten to here, I'm going to stitch over both of these layers and catch them both in. So I've overlapped where I began. I'm going to use my knot button and have it tie a knot in place. You can always just stitch and then back stitch over that if you don't have a knot feature. And rather than pull too far away, I'm just going to jump over here because the next edge I'm going to do, actually that's a lie, hold on. Let's pull this out and snip it. And then we'll go back to starting on this edge where the moon and the moon shadow split apart. So we're just going to stitch down that raw edge of the moon now with that same stitch. All right, so I've overlapped enough there. I'm going to do my knot again. And we're done with the block. So trim all your little threads. Make sure you trim on the back too. And you also just want to inspect your edge, that you got everything in there you wanted to. This looks great to me. Again, if you don't have a blanket stitch edge like this, you can always do, you can do a normal stitch all the way around. You're just going to have a fuzzier edge. You can also do a normal stitch all the way around and then do a zigzag stitch over the edge. But anything you can do to kind of hold that edge in. The glue is going to do most of the job here, and then the quilting we do over it is going to do most of the work, but we do want to at least have a little bit of sewing stability on that edge. If you're never going to wash it, never worry about it. But if you are going to wash it and want to get some quilt crinkle, you do want to have a sturdy edge. So, one more thread there. Here's our final block. You'll just trim this to 12.5, and then we'll add it to the other 3 blocks to finish the entire top. So next I'll show you how to foundation paper piece the acorns. I've shown that before, so if you've watched other videos, feel free to skip ahead to that and just do it on your own, but there's no big tricks in this one, so hang in there. Okay, so standard setup here, we're going to have our templates. We're going to start with template A. We have our pieces cut out in order. I have them out of order now. So here they are in order. And we have our other set over here. So we'll do those next. But this is a standard paper piecing template again. So we're going to start with 1A, which is the acorn here. Our first piece is going to face away from the template. It's going to cover all the areas of the template here and 1/4 inch out. So this should be definitely big enough to do that. And then we're going to move from piece 1 to 2, sewing the seam in between and pressing out. And then from then over to 3, pressing the seam, pressing out. These black squares here indicate that it's a background color section. So if you see that on the template. just a little thing to help here. So we can take our first piece. I'm going to do them in sets of 4 because that's an efficient way to do it. So I'm going to line right sides together along that seam edge we're going to sew on. And I can hold it up to a light. It's going to be hard to see there, but I have it over that edge. Then we're going to stitch on that line. Remember to set your stitch length to 1.5. This helps perforate the paper so you can pull it off. Okie doke. Next step, we're going to fold the paper back. Make sure that we did stitch that seam. You can see there that our, oh my goodness, we have a seam there. It's going to fold out on that. So fold our paper back, and then we will take our scissors and trim to about a 1/4 inch seam. Then press that piece out. Just a little steam. I'm ready to move on to piece 3. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for all these pieces, and then I'll do piece 3. It's the same as this, just on the other side. And then I'll add on these last pieces down here. Here they are. All right, so let's trim these. Okay, I'll put this on the other side now. Trim. And press. Okay, now we add on pieces 5 and 4 and do the same process. So we'll do all of 4 first and then all of 5. Alright, so trim up any threads that you've had come through your seams. And then we will stack these aside while we sew the next ones. And we'll trim them all together. So, next section, we're going to start with our stem piece. Put on 4 triangles for 2. Press that out, stick on 2 rectangles for 3 and 4. Put on the 5th piece here, the acorn top. And then finally, cut out 6 and 7 with 2 more triangles. So let's begin template B. Our first piece faces away. Second piece position right sides together with 1/4 inch of overlap to the piece you're going into. Number 2 is very small, so you don't need very much. Go ahead and trim this up. And press it out. This one's going to press out kind of weird because it's a very small seam. Just so as you know. Alright, next pieces 3 and 4. You can actually sew both of these at the same time. Well, don't do that, I lied. If you do that, you might sew over the other piece, and that would be bad. Okay, next up we're going to add on section 5 here. It's going to be our color C. It should be extra wide to make sure that there's no issues fitting it on. Okay, you can sew on both 6 and 7 at the same time without any worry of overlap. You just want to center the triangle on the back. And because it's a triangle, it will keep the grain line, which is good for our structure. and 7 the same way. Make sure this worked well. Fold back 6 and then 7. There you go. That's the whole piece. So, let me do these other ones. We'll press them out, we'll trim it up, and we'll sew them together. One more piece. And trim those up. That backwards. Okay, so I can go ahead and press these out now. Okay, let me move this board, and then we'll get to trimming. Grabbing a smaller ruler here. Okay, so we'll take this first piece. These are both rectangular, so we're just going to align our 1/4 inch on this inside line, and then leave ourselves a nice seam allowance there. Do this for every edge. If you want to be fancy, you can align it on a corner and get 2 cuts in one. And there's your acorn piece. Do the same thing on these. Make sure it's all pressed out well, and that nothing's folded in on itself. Okay, next up, we'll sew these together and end up with our final acorns. I realized that I didn't cut out the background pieces we need to add onto this, so we'll cut those next, add them on, and then sew the block together. Okay, so I'm setting my machine to a 1.0. My standard practice is to use my guarded 1/4 inch foot. This has a little guard on the side, very helpful. So I'm going to swap that out real quick. And I don't know if I said this already, but I put my stitch length down to 1.0 to really perforate those papers. So you can see on the template, it says which sides to stick together there. So we're going to fold those right sides together, match the corners up, and then stitch on that line, that perfect 1/4 inch line. All right, pull the papers off. Now we're going to press these seams open. I'll do that over here. So we have our acorns here. Now we need to cut those other background pieces. So let me reference that real quick. We need 4 3 1/4 and 4 4-inch. It didn't seem like I'd cut enough background for that. All right, I've quadrupled over here just to make it super duper easy. Let's make that on a 4. So now what we're going to do is append large triangles to either side. And the same thing on the top, but we're going to do that in the next step. But let's lay it all out for now. Okay. So we'll sew these on, press them out, sew these on, press them out. Then we'll trim 6.5 inches. I think I know where my ruler is. Hope it's over there. I'm still going to be using my 1/4 inch foot. And when I put these on, I just want to center it so that point goes through a 1/4 inch intersection there. And you can change, you can change your stitch length back to 2, up to 2 if you want. I put it up to 1.5. So we're going to press these with the seams pointing out like that, okay? Let's do that to the rest of them. Okay, so I'm going to trim off these guys just to keep those corners nice so that we can really see what we're doing. This is probably why I should have trimmed the dog ears after pressing out. But live and learn. Okie doke. So our last step, and then we're We have 4 blocks to sew together is to add on the top and the bottom. So let's do that. Again, center that triangle as best you can, and then stitch a 1/4 inch on a 1. Okay, so here's our 4 acorns. We can now choose how we're going to arrange them. Like this little jig here. So we're going to trim these to 6.5 inch square each, sew them all together, and then we'll have our finished block. All right, well, that doesn't seem to be big enough. Kind of wondering what happened there. Let me pull some papers off and see if it presses out more. This is one of those things in quilting where sometimes stuff doesn't go as planned. But you know what? We can always sew these together and just add a border of the background to make it big enough. Because I'm not going to sew these again. And we still have enough of our background. So let me press this. Here's our piece again. Still under. So I'm going to press all these. I'm going to snip off the edges. And then to make that 12.5 inches, I'm just going to add a little bit more. I am going to trim these corners off though. Pardon me. All right, so let me pull these papers off so we don't have to sew through them again. to do. I think, yeah. So now we can arrange them how we want. Like I said, I'm gonna do, I kind of like the witchy spinning one too, but I might just make them all point to the middle. Let's do that, I think. So you're just gonna sew together two sets here. I missed a paper. So here, press them open, put those together, match your points, sew that across. You've done this before if you've made a 4x4 square, which is down to squares now. Okie doke, and here's our finished acorn, dancing acorns block. You can see I use this textured background, and it made a nice continuous background, really hiding those seams. I'm using 3 separate fabrics for the acorns, helped highlight each of them, and using a textured fabric for the acorn cap really gave it that sort of texture that you expect to see in an acorn. We came in a little under 12.5, I believe. Let me measure from this corner. Yeah, so my block came in just under 12, actually. So what we'll probably end up doing is either adding some strips to the side here to make it the correct width, or I may just trim all the blocks down to this 12-inch square. So I'm going to go stick this with my moon, and then we'll move on to the wheat block. Okay, so now we're going to make the wheat stalk trio block. Let me pull out my instructions here. I've set out all the pieces that we cut. Just make sure that they're all there. And here's our instructions. So what we're going to do first is take our sets of 2 5/8 inch squares here. We're going to mark them and sew on either edge of that, a 1/4 inch away, cut them down the middle, and then press them out into HSTs, 12 each. Okay? Then we're going to trim those to 2 1/4 inch square. Then we're going to assemble everything in a normal assembly fashion. So these blocks are going to get sewn together in 3 sets. So we're making 3 of these. And then this block is going to get sewn to the middle block, trimmed, and then sewn to this block. And then we're also going to trim when we sew these together here to make sure that we're getting this nice thin piece here, which is harder to get if we don't trim after we sew on. And it won't be as straight if we don't trim. So I'm going to show you that little trick, which is really useful to get these very slender pieces here. Okay, so let's make our HSTs first. I'm going to move some stuff over. Actually, let's move it up. So we can stack all of these together. And then we want to get a small ruler and a marking device. I have a little 4.5-inch ruler here. We're also going to want to change our foot to one without a guard. So I'm going to use my guarded foot after this, but I'm going to use my nice clear edge foot for this first part. Oh, you know what? I'm not going to use that actually. I have this other foot that is a 1/4 inch on either side. So I'm going to use this as my guide to sew on either edge of that line. Again, not a guarded foot. So let's make some diagonal lines in the back of these blocks on the wrong side, of course. We're going to be putting right sides together. All right, so we've marked all of these. Next, we're going to lay one each on top of our background fabric. And then sew on either side of this line, 1/4 inch away from that line. I use a 1.5 in this instance on my stitch length. All right, so cut all these apart. Then we'll cut them in half. I'm going to go ahead and dog ear these before. I do this in case we decide not to trim, because if they're good enough and close enough to 2 1/4, I sometimes won't bother. But that won't get rid of these, and they become doubled when you press open. So half the cuts now. Okay, press these open. Okay, let's see how this fares on our 2/4 test. By golly, looks pretty damn good. So let's try a few other ones. So it looks like most of them are either 2/4 or a little under, and that's okay. We can work with that. So let's make sets of 3. Because we're going to have a stack, we're making 3 of these. So we need 4 stacks of 3 for each color. Okay. This piece will go between these. This piece will go between these. And this will go on either side. 2, 3. No, I'm sorry, I put these backwards. Okay, so now we will follow these instructions here, sewing this set together and trimming in between, sewing these sets together. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to start by sewing these two together and then these sets together. Then we'll trim and then we'll add on that other piece. I'm going to switch to my guarded foot. So, switching to my guarded foot there. Okay, so those three. Now let's sew these pieces together. I'm going to go ahead and press all of these seams open, and I'm going to press all of these seams toward the HST. Okay? Okay, so with these guys, you just want to check that you only have a ½ inch of background fabric here, okay? So line up that seam on one of your lines, take a ruler, and put a ½ inch on that line, and then trim just a little bit off of there. It's going to be a lot less on these than it will be on here. And it's less important on short distances, but it will become very important for this block. So I'm going to go ahead and do that 3 times. So really minimal amounts take off of that one. Okay, next up, we're going to sew these together. All right. Now all of these, similar to before, we're going to press this seam out to the HST. So we get a nice clean middle there. Oh, sorry, out to the HST. So we get a nice clean middle. Okay, so next up, let's sew this piece to the top of here. These might be a little, actually that looks pretty good. So just make sure that when you start, you align this top piece with here, because we can always trim a little off the bottom. I might be having some gaps here because I didn't trim my HSTs because they were a little undersized. The way you can make sure that they are oversized is by first make sure that fits. Make sure they're oversized by sewing it closer to that middle line. Okay, and like the other piece, I'm going to press this out, come in and trim to a 1/2 inch, and then connect it to this one. Okay, so like we did before, let's try to get this seam on a nice straight line. I've had a little bit of a wonky sew here, so it's not going to be perfect. That probably needs stretched a little bit. So I've got my seam on the line there. See how this edge is getting kind of wobbly? You can just drop right down on that seam. Sort of average that out, do your best, and then trim to a 1/2 inch. So once again, I have a little bit of a curve in here, so I'm going to match each end on the inch. Set my ruler a 1/2 inch beyond that. Trim off our wobbly excess. So line on an inch mark, both ends. 1/2 inch over that. And trim. So now we will sew. I'm going to rotate it. Actually, I'm not. I'm not going to do that. So now we will match up on this top again. And then do your best to align those stitches on the way down. And make sure that you're not stitching into that other seam. Okay, so that was a real close sew, but you can see now it's all together. So I'm gonna do that 2 more times. Okay, so in this instance, I just want to show you that I did sew on that other seam. So I'm gonna have to press it that direction. I'm not gonna have an option because of that. Anyway, this is a really tight one, so do your best. It won't be the end of the world if you stitch on top of it a little bit. Okay, and so to finally form each stalk unit, sew this to the top here, and you can match the stem seam, and any extra you have there, just snip it off. You don't need it. I'm just going to pinch it real tight there instead of pinning. Leave it on the edge. I'll probably regret it. let's line these up and just pull our threads out to the side. There's going to be a lot of them. And we can make it a little easier on ourselves by trimming those threads. Okay, so now the magic of this block is that we're going to add on some pieces here, and I'm just going to sew this piece on top of each of the three. This is going to give us an inch of maneuverability. Okay, and so what this allows us to do is play with the heights of each stalk. So we're going to make the middle stalk about a ½ inch lower than the other two. And what we want to do with this is just make sure that we have at least 12½ inches of overlap in height. And it looks like with that one, we do. That being said, I'm just going to make it a little bit closer. So just align that the way you like with the first one. I'm going to flip this over to the spot I want to start on. I'll just sew down from there. So we'll just observe how that one is, and then we'll try to align this one to about the same difference there. All right, so we've sewn these together. You can see that our sewing is not completely straight, but that's okay. Nothing in nature is either. So again, the most important thing is that we want to be able to trim this to 12½ inches tall, which puts us, great. So I'm going to align this mostly on both edges, just beneath here on a 1-inch line, so that I can trim this bottom edge here. I'm going to measure up 12½, and then I'm going to trim on that line. So we're half an inch above that line. So I underdid it a little bit there. We'll just kind of keep that in the seam whenever we attach them, because we're going to add extra width both sides here, because right now we're sitting at 12 inches. So before I do that, I'm just going to clean up this edge, make it nice and straight so we can add on another piece. Looks like I can get 5/8 over. Okay, so finally, on these two side pieces, and they're more than 12.5 inches. So do a little overhang and sew it on there. Then we'll trim it up. You can even just center it if you want. Okay, and then our final step with this block is to trim it to 12.5 by 12.5, which we should already have in one dimension. Looks pretty good. And then just center it across these other two. So about 3/4 inches in there and 3/4 inches in there. Now trim all the way around. Someone's alarm is going off upstairs. So here's where we stand. Put these all on here. Here's our 3 blocks. So we just need to assemble them together, and then we will have our piece together. You'll continue to follow through with my normal quilting instructions from last month to finish it off. Picking a binding. The amount of binding is noted in the pattern that you need. I think I noted that. Yes, so you'll need about 3 width of fabric cuts of yardage to get your binding. You need 120 inches. You can also make that with 6 cuts of a fat quarter. From 1 fat quarter, you can get 160 inches of binding if you're cutting 2 1/4 inch strips. So, yeah. And if you need to use a backing, you just need a backing that is about 24 inches wide, or sorry, 18 inches wide minimum, and then 40 inches long. Will get you 4 inches on either side of your 36 if you have a 40 to 42 inch piece of fabric. So this is a little bit small. I'm going to edit the pattern to add triangles on here that make it bigger, so you shouldn't have any issue fitting that. Otherwise, like I said, you just sew all 3 of these together like you would, trim them each to the same square size, and then do your binding and quilting. Quilting and binding, sorry. So thank you for watching. Again, this is the pattern for the Demeter table runner. It's my take on a sort of modern autumn runner. Here's the 3 blocks as I have interpreted them. Again, the acorns can go any direction you want. There's a ton of other options for the moon as well. This block is pretty standard, so I would do this one the same way each time. And also, if you do want to add a little bit more fabric, I noticed that I kind of ran short, so you could make this piece a little bit taller if you want to get more difference in the levels here. So, again, thank you for watching. This has been the Demeter Table Runner with Tommy Plays with Fiber Patreon, and I really appreciate you being here. So, thanks again.